In July 2014, a 17-year-old girl sat in her bedroom in Plainville, Massachusetts, and sent a text message. She did not drive anywhere. She did not touch anyone. She did not buy a weapon. She did not even leave her house. And a court found her guilty of manslaughter. This is the case that rewrote what it means to kill someone. The case that asked a question nobody had ever asked in an American courtroom before. Can words alone cause a death? Can a text message be a murder weapon? This is the full story. Conrad Roy III was 18 years old in the summer of 2014. He lived in Mattapoisett, Massachusetts, a small coastal town south of Boston. By all accounts, he was a quiet, sensitive young man. He loved boating. He worked with his father and grandfather in the marine salvage business. He had struggled with depression and anxiety for years. Michelle Carter was 17 years old. She lived in Plainville, about an hour away from Conrad. The two had met briefly in Florida in 2012 during a family vacation. They had spent very little time together in person. Their entire relationship existed almost entirely through text messages and phone calls. And what a relationship it was. Thousands of texts, declarations of love, plans for the future. Two teenagers who barely knew each other in real life, but poured everything into their phones. Conrad had attempted suicide before. He had been hospitalized. He had been in therapy. Michelle knew all of this. She had been there through his darkest moments, texting him support, telling him things would get better. And then something changed. In the months leading up to July 2014, the tone of Michelle's messages shifted. Where she had once encouraged Conrad to seek help, she began encouraging something else entirely. She told him he needed to go through with it. She told him he had been talking about it for too long. She told him that if he loved her, he would do it. She told him she would be right there with him. Conrad Roy was found dead on July 13th, 2014. He was 18 years old. He had died of carbon monoxide poisoning, sitting alone in his pickup truck in a parking lot in Fairhaven, Massachusetts. He had run a water pump engine inside the cab. His family reported him missing that evening. His body was found the following morning. When police began investigating Conrad's death, they found his phone. And on that phone, they found the texts. Thousands of them. A trail of messages that painted a picture nobody in that investigation was prepared for. In the weeks before Conrad died, Michelle Carter had been actively encouraging him to end his life. When he expressed doubt, she pushed harder. When he said he was scared, she told him it would be okay. When he said he was not sure he could go through with it, she told him he could. She told him, "You always say you are going to do it, but you never do. I just want to make sure tonight is the night." She sent him instructions. She researched methods. She told him which approach would work and which would not. And then came the text that would define the entire case. On the night Conrad died, he had gotten out of his truck because the carbon monoxide was getting too much and he was frightened. He called Michelle. He told her he had gotten out. He was scared. He was having second thoughts. Michelle Carter told him to get back in. He did. After Conrad died, Michelle Carter sent a text to a friend. She said, "His death is my fault. I could have stopped it, but I told him to get back in." She later told the same friend, "I was on the phone with him, and he got out of the car because the carbon monoxide was getting too much, and he got scared. I should have called the police. I should have called his parents. I did not. I told him to get back in." Those words, written by Michelle Carter herself, became the foundation of the prosecution's entire case. Michelle Carter was charged with involuntary manslaughter in February 2015. She was 17 at the time of Conrad's death, which meant she was tried as a juvenile, but the case was moved to adult court due to the severity of the charges. The case raised legal questions that had never been answered before. Can you be criminally responsible for someone else's suicide? Does encouraging someone to die constitute a crime? Where is the line between free speech and criminal conduct? The prosecution argued the answer was simple. Michelle Carter did not just send cruel messages. She actively directed Conrad Roy to his death. She researched methods. She gave him instructions. She stayed on the phone with him while he died. And when he tried to save himself, she ordered him back into that truck. The defense argued something different. They said Michelle Carter was herself a deeply troubled teenager, that she had been heavily medicated on antidepressants that affected her judgment, that Conrad Roy had made his own decision, that words, however cruel, could not legally constitute manslaughter. There was no jury. Michelle Carter waived her right to a jury trial. Judge Lawrence Moniz would decide her fate alone. The prosecution presented the texts, all of them, page after page after page of messages in which Michelle Carter pushed, encouraged, directed, and instructed Conrad Roy toward his death. They presented evidence that she had researched suicide methods online. They presented evidence that she had watched him die over the phone and said nothing to anyone. The defense presented a teenager who was lonely, medicated, and desperately seeking attention. They argued she had been influenced by a television show called Glee, in which a character dies by suicide and the community rallies around those left behind. They argued Michelle had wanted to be the grieving girlfriend, that it was a fantasy that had spiraled catastrophically out of control. Judge Moniz listened to everything. On June 16, 2017, Judge Lawrence Moniz delivered his verdict. He went through the evidence methodically. He addressed each argument the defense had made. He acknowledged the complexity of the legal questions involved. And then he said, "The court finds the defendant guilty of involuntary manslaughter." The courtroom went silent. Judge Moniz explained his reasoning. He said that when Conrad Roy got out of that truck, the threat to his life had been interrupted, and that Michelle Carter, through a single phone call, had restarted it. That her instruction to get back in the truck was the direct cause of Conrad Roy's death. He said words can constitute wanton and reckless conduct, and that Michelle Carter's words on that night had done exactly that. Conrad Roy's family wept in the courtroom. His mother said, "Today, justice was served for my son." Michelle Carter showed little visible reaction. In August 2017, Michelle Carter was sentenced to 2.5 years in jail, with 15 months to serve, and the remainder suspended. She was also placed on 5 years probation. 2.5 years for telling someone to get back in a truck and die. Her legal team appealed immediately. The case went to the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court, which upheld the conviction in 2019. It then went to the United States Supreme Court, which declined to hear the appeal. Michelle Carter began serving her sentence in February 2019. She was released in January 2020 after serving 11 months for good behavior. The case sparked enormous national debate. Civil liberties organizations argued the conviction was a dangerous precedent, that criminalizing speech, however cruel, set a troubling standard for free expression, that Conrad Roy had made his own choice and Michelle Carter could not legally be held responsible for it. Others argued the opposite, that Michelle Carter had weaponized a vulnerable person's mental illness, that she had not merely encouraged him, but directed him, step by step, to his death, that the law had to evolve to account for the reality of how people communicate in the digital age. In 2022, a Hulu limited series called The Girl from Plainville dramatized the case. Elle Fanning played Michelle Carter. The series sparked renewed debate about the case and renewed pain for the Roy family. Conrad's father, Conrad Roy II, has spoken publicly about his son many times. He has said that Conrad was a good kid who struggled, that he deserved help, that he got something very different instead. The Michelle Carter case is unlike almost any other case in American criminal history. There is no physical evidence of violence. There is no weapon. There is no crime scene in the traditional sense. There is only a phone and the words on it. What Michelle Carter did to Conrad Roy was not a moment of rage. It was not a single impulsive act. It was weeks of calculated, deliberate manipulation of a teenager who was already in crisis. She knew he was vulnerable. She knew he had tried before. She used that knowledge like a tool. Whether the law was the right instrument to address that is a question reasonable people still disagree on. But what is not a question is what happened in that parking lot in Fairhaven, Massachusetts on the night of July 12th, 2014. A young man who was scared, who got out of that truck, who called someone he trusted, was told to get back in. And he did. Conrad Roy was 18 years old. He loved boating. He worked with his father and grandfather. He had his whole life ahead of him. If this case made you think, leave a comment. Tell me where you stand. Was this justice, or did the law go too far? And if you are new here, this is Beyond the Case. Every case deserves a second look. Subscribe. I will see you in the next one.